Welcome to episode 4 of the Practice Squad, a show where we talk about football and make replacement refs look like pros. I'm your host and fourth string quarterback Jeremy, joined each and every week by my co-host and backup long snapper Joseph. How's it going, man?
Well, that depends on if the Fitzmagic can win this
Yeah,
game.
we'll see. We'll make sure to keep our viewers up to date on that. So we're live right here on YouTube each and every week at 8:30 p.m. Pacific, right after Monday Night Football, and in this case, right as Monday Night Football is about to end. If you're tired of the punditry or just want a fresh voice, come listen to a couple random dudes talk about football and have a good time. This week we've got a recap of this week's games, lots of awesome discussions, and as always, predictions. So there's a lot to cover, so let's go ahead and dive right in to our segment 1, week 3 recap. So our game of the week this week was Saints at Falcons. What did you think of that game?
Well, we've been right now 2 weeks in a row about game of the
We
week,
have,
haven't
yeah.
we? Yeah, that was
Just
that was
soak
a
in
shootout.
all the credit for that.
Yes, seriously, especially the fourth quarter, man, that fourth quarter was amazing. Well, first big news is Drew Brees became the all-time completions leader in the NFL,
If you can't hear that, that's
passing
me
Brett
clapping.
Favre. And the Falcons, I went back and watched the full replay version at that moment. And unless there was something else they did later, Falcons fans and Falcons team and leaders, you guys blew it. That was atrocious. The man just became the all-time leader in career completions for a quarterback, passing Brett Favre, and there was nothing. The next play just happened. So an embarrassment, I think, on the NFL and Atlanta for allowing that to happen.
Is
In my
that
opinion.
so that's an interesting question to kind of talk about what records deserve stoppage, because I obviously when Peyton Manning broke the touchdown record back a few years ago, they did pause briefly. I actually think it was against the Niners.
No, well, that's the thing is there was two of them. I mean, I think one of them was against Houston, and I can't remember if it was in Houston or not. But
Well, he broke the season and the all-time, right?
yes, and one of them was against Houston, I believe, and the other one was against
I think
maybe
the
the Niners.
Niners was the all-time record.
But one of those was still on the road. So I understand your point about what records warrant a stoppage, but really the question is, forget stoppage or not, but how much stoppage for a given record? I mean, because Calvin Johnson was home when it happened, and for the all-time single season yardage record, but there should be something. I mean, even though Emmitt Smith, when he broke the record, he was a longtime Cowboy. He was a Cardinal when he broke the record, but it happened in Dallas, I believe. So there's kind of a special circumstance there. But these like all-time records or like a major single season record at least have something. Does it show up on the screen? Is there some kind of clapping by the fans? Is there something? But there was like nothing for this. It was like his offensive lineman just kind of slapped him on the butt, got back in the huddle, and which is a sign of his humility. But like, I think there should have been something like, "Congratulations to Drew Brees for passing Brett Favre for all-time completions," and then a quick 10, 15-second cheer, and then you go on. So, but there was just the announcers just made a take about it and congratulated him, and that was it.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like all-time pass completions is on the line for me. I'm not sure if that warrants a game stoppage. Maybe it does, and you probably could convince me that it does. But they were on the road, and so maybe it would have been, just a quick something up on the big TV screen. But yeah,
I sure
but
hope so.
either way, he broke it. The 6,300 previously held by Brett Favre. So congratulations to Drew Brees if you're listening to our show. Just kidding. So great game. It was a really clean, close, exciting overtime game. You don't get many of those. So interesting, kind of some interesting thoughts I had. So the Falcons just couldn't rush the ball. They had 48 total rushing yards, which is odd considering that they have a pretty dynamic, quote unquote, dynamic run game. And New Orleans squeaked by with 11 penalties for 120 yards. So I'd like to see a stat that shows how much, if you have 10 or more accepted penalties, what percentage of the time you win. I'd be curious to know that. Because 10 is a lot, and generally when teams are shooting themselves in the foot that much, they tend to lose, of course. But I would be curious to know what that percentage is. Unfortunately, I don't have it right in front of me. So
one thing
go ahead.
Oh, good. I would say one thing I picked up also that I forget to put my time was that rookie wide receiver for the Falcons, Calvin Ridley.
Yes.
Dude, guy's a
7
stud.
catches for 146 yards.
And 3 touchdowns. Yeah, that was crazy. And, and has somewhat of a connection to Julio Jones, both being from Alabama. But that'll be an interesting duo there as he can kind of mentor him. And he was good.
Yeah, he was good.
So him and Jones can grow and be
for
great.
Sure. And also on the Saints side, Alvin Kamara had 190 all-purpose yards. And Michael Thomas was 10 catches for 129 yards. So they had some really, really solid offensive numbers. And of course, Drew Brees was his typical 80% completion. I don't have his stats in front of me, but he threw for 350 plus yards. So he was really good again.
They both had 5 total touchdowns. Brees had 3 passing, 2 rushing, and Ryan had 5 passing. And I don't think there were any picks.
I don't think there were any picks. I don't think there was. There was one Falcons fumble that New Orleans picked up, but other than that, I think that was it. And Drew Brees had that great. Did you see that his rushing touchdown where he broke the tackle?
Oh yeah. Yeah, dude, he looked like Barry Sanders out there.
Yeah, that was great. That was awesome. He's showing no signs of aging at all.
There was a great quote in there where I think it was Chris Carter, the announcer. He's like, he's not much of a runner, but he likes taking care of his body, and then he just cut off. Yeah. That was a good one.
I think I caught this correctly that the Saints use their third string quarterback for kick and punt returns. A guy named Hill.
So I don't know if I recall him for that. He had possessions, like actual run possessions.
Yeah,
just
there was one regular plays too, but he was also doing returns.
I think I saw that for one. I don't know if I saw it more than once though. But the key moment was there was 2.5 minutes left in the third, I want to say. And because I remember Chris Carter made a comment about it saying, you have the all-time completions record quarterback out there, and it's third down, and it's close to the end zone, and you're playing your third-string quarterback. But that guy, he had a couple good runs, though.
Oh, yeah, he was
tough.
Yeah.
So
did you see the blocked punt in the third? Okay.
Yes. Wait. The one that got reversed because, or no, that's the kick. The block. What was the play where the guy hit the center? The Saints player hit the center and he got taken back. Was that a block kick or a block punt?
I think that was a field goal that got erased, wasn't it?
Okay, but you saw that play. You saw that play, right? Because that's right. Because after that, Ryan passed to Sanu for a touchdown and then went for 2 to Sanu as well. To tie the game. But for the block punt, I did see that.
Question about that. I watched the replay a couple of times. How was that not a roughing the kicker? He literally just mowed into the guy. And I get that, it's a tough situation, I think, for refs because the momentum is always charging towards the kicker, right? So if you block the ball, it's very hard for your body not to fall or at least make contact with the kicker's leg. But this wasn't even just his leg. He made contact with almost his whole body. And they did not call it. And I wonder if it was they thought it was incidental contact or I don't know what they were thinking, but to me it seemed like a pretty clear roughing the kicker case. What did you think about that?
So I think the nuance there is if they block the punts. I agree that it with them. I don't think it should have been a roughing the kicker. Because if someone can legally, not being offsides or encroachment or whatever, break the line of scrimmage and get to the punter that well, like what's he going to do? Just try to stop and grab it with his hands and not hit him? Like he can't run into the guy to try to tackle him exactly to ruin the punt. I get that. But if he just has a clear shot to block the punt and then he hits him afterwards, yes, he has a lot of momentum. I don't think it should be a penalty.
Do you think that's mainly predicated, though, on whether the ball was blocked or not?
Yes.
Okay.
I know it's a fine line, but you don't want to punish a guy for being in a good spot to block a punt.
Yeah, I can see both sides of it, and I feel like it's a very difficult situation because every time that a guy's going for a block, it's almost always going to result in contact with the kicker. So even if he misses the block, he still in his head is thinking, hey, I might block the ball and then I hit the kicker, and if I didn't block the ball and I hit the kicker, then I get a penalty. So it's sort of a weird, it's basically purely based on performance then whether or not the penalty is being called. So it's a tough case. So my only other comment on this game was just a philosophical reflection on how many bad cornerbacks there are in this league. So I obviously watched the whole Niner game, and we'll get to that in a minute, but there are just a lot of bad corners in this league, man. And there's also some bad receivers too, but so many blown coverages and just terrible zone. Why does any team run zone coverage? I just see zone coverage, and unless you have a really good pass rush, I don't know why any team runs zone, to be honest.
So I like zone when you have some really good safeties. If you can run like a free safety and a strong safety at the same time, and run zone, then they're basically just like center fielders out there. So I actually like that scheme, but maybe it's not as effective if you have a team on offense with multiple weapons, and where man-to-man is probably a better way to go.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like teams do that almost as a way to sort of mitigate their lack of pass rush, but it almost backfires. So anyway, I'll trust me, I'll be diving a lot more into bad corners when we talk about the Niners. Yeah. But general thoughts from the week. So you saw that the Clay Matthews penalty.
Wait, the one this week? No, I did not watch that game.
So yeah, he got another penalty for sacking Alex Smith. And he even, like, you could tell his body language as he was sacking Smith, that he like lifted up his arms and rolled off him as quickly as he could to show like, hey, look, I didn't touch him with my helmet. I didn't land on him on purpose. I did what I was supposed to do. And there was a flag that came out, and you could just see how frustrated he was. So obviously there's a lot of buzz in the league right now about how way overboard refs are being towards protecting the quarterback. And in fact, the worst example of this is defensive lineman William Hayes from none other than your Miami Dolphins tore his ACL avoiding a roughing the passer call this week. And he planted his foot in order to avoid the landing contact issue, the point of emphasis, and he twisted his leg and he's out for the season. So I don't know. I don't know much about Hayes, whether he's an impact player. I've never heard of him, so I kind of don't think he is. But regardless, for him, his season's over because he was trying to follow a rule that is way over the top right now. So I feel like that's one of the big stories coming out of the league this week, is just how overboard they've gone. Did you see any other examples of that this week?
Yeah, so and it's interesting because one was in the Miami game, and I know we'll get to that in a minute. But I'm interesting to when that Hayes play occurred relative to this one I'm about to refer to. It was where the Raiders were down in the red zone, and the defensive end put a good hit on Derek Carr, and it was clean. Like it was definitely bang bang, but it was a solid hit, and his body actually kind of landed with him. So neither that play nor the Clay Matthews play from the Vikings game were warrant the penalty, but relative to each other, the hit the Dolphins player put on Carr was way more of a quote unquote penalty worthy play than Clay Matthews on Kirk Cousins. And so when I saw that they didn't call it on the Dolphins player, I was kind of surprised and thought maybe they're trying to tone back from how aggressive they were last week. So I'm just wondering when that happened with reference to the Hayes injury. I'll have to go back
I
and
think
look.
that was just an anomaly because I don't think they've scaled back at all. I think they're continuing
Okay.
full fledged whole
Well,
hog
there was
on
another
this.
one in the Falcons game. There was one in the Falcons game that wasn't called. Pretty sure Matt Ryan got hit pretty hard, and it looked clean from how you and I view what the penalty should be. But I don't think they called that one either. But maybe these are anomalies. But I do agree that overall they are being too stringent on it, and it's
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, what you're pointing out is the other side of the coin, which is the inconsistency, and that's the other problem. Is not only is it too strict, but it's being applied inconsistently. So it's a double disaster. So we'll see what they do about it. I doubt much is going to change this year. I mean, they rarely ever change stuff like this mid-year. They'll have a meeting in the off season to talk about the rules and blah blah blah, and maybe change something. So good luck to all the defensive ends out there trying to do your job. It's going to be hard for another 13 games. Okay, so major injuries. So I picked up there were a couple significant injuries for the 49ers. There didn't seem to be a whole lot of by way of season-ending major injuries that I saw around the league, but the biggest one, and this was a heartbreaker, was Jimmy Garoppolo tore his ACL yesterday. He's out for the season. It was confirmed today by the 49ers, by Kyle Shanahan, that he tore his ACL. The only silver lining to that is that apparently, when you tear an ACL, I'm not a medical doctor, so I'm not going to speak like I am, but apparently when you tear an ACL, there's also a high likelihood that you can break or tear other things in your knee along the process, and apparently the tear was pretty exclusively just to the ACL. So hopefully that may take a couple of weeks off his rehab. So it's the best of the worst, I guess, is the way to say it. So prayers out to him, obviously, and his family, and just it's a terrible situation, obviously for him, and then for the Niners. So much hope was built around him. Obviously, he was the center of the team that we were building around, and when you lose your starting quarterback that's on the rise, your season's never going to be the same. Richard Sherman's out for about 3 weeks with a calf strain, so that's another star player that was given a blow. So with that, let's dive right into our 49ers and Dolphins recap. So we're gonna cut the Niner talk.
I got plenty more general stuff.
Oh, you want to keep talking general stuff? All right, so let's keep doing that.
Yeah.
Did you have, before we move on to that? Do you have any injury news?
Not that I'm aware of, no. So I watched the Rams Chargers game, and the Rams are just, I think they're scary. They look really balanced. Their defense, their corners today were pretty weak. When I say today, I watched the game today. Their corners were pretty weak. So that's funny that I had a similar thought on that. But their front seven looked pretty good, and their offense is clicking. Gurley is just, he's so good after the catch. Like, he should be, they should be throwing him the ball more and more because he's so good after he catches the ball. Brandon Cooks having great chemistry with Goff. and Robert Woods as well. Goff was looking good. He had very good pass protection against the Chargers. So I'm suspecting the Rams, for them, it's going to be a disappointment if they don't go to the Super Bowl this year. I think I'm seeing them as the clear NFC team right now. There's some issues with the Vikings and the Packers. They're a little more inconsistent than we thought, and Rodgers may be not as healthy. The Eagles are off to a slower start, and we were never suspecting the Falcons and Saints to be the leader. So I think the Rams are the clear NFC team right now. One thing that did happen in that game I want to talk about is there's a play where Robert Woods caught it near the line of scrimmage, and a rookie cornerback just put a good hit on him, took him down. And then he stands over the guy, and he's looking down at him. He's just standing over him. And I'm like, this guy's going to get called for a penalty.
The eyes.
Yeah, sure enough, he got a taunting call. And I thought about it, and I'll admit, I got a little angry. Actually, I got pretty angry because I thought,
because you did that yesterday and nobody called you on it.
Because it's really stupid. It takes away from the sport. You see, the game is inherently violent in a physics sense, but it should never have any sense of disrespect or violence in an ethics or moral sense. And when you see stuff like that, it takes away from the purity of sport. You know, when you're playing your opponent, you should want them to be at their healthiest and their best, and the well-being of their humanity should always transcend the outcome of a game, let alone a game you get played millions to play for. So, and the irony is, if you want to have this, I'm more macho, I just hit you and I'm going to taunt you, well then, within this flawed logic, I obviously don't believe this really, but within the flawed logic of the person who thinks this displays manliness or toughness, the wide receiver should take his helmet off and just beat the other guy down and break his jaw. And I'm being serious, like serious within this hypothetical, that if that is what displays toughness and doing well in a sport, then they shouldn't wear pads. They should bring brass knuckles.
It should just be open season.
And, yeah, because it's like, because that, like, for me, I'm going to be extreme here, but it's like, that would be the case. I'm going to go out there, I'm going to do my best, I'm going to be respectful, I'm going to do my very best and play within the integrity of the rules. Or you're going to cross this line and get to this gray area of like what's tough and who's manly, and I'm just going to take you down and, you know, suffocate you. Like, that sounds crazy, but that, we want to talk about the purity and integrity of a game and sport, then let's just turn it into wrestling and boxing. If we're going to talk about this, what's masculine and what's tough, because it's just stupid. You hit a guy, okay, good hit. And you're just going to stand over him and look down at him. It's just dumb. So I'm not saying the penalty should be increased. I think 15 yards is good enough. It's just kind of a sentiment of how weird it is and how that gets passed on to college players and high school players, and to where you even see kids playing pee-wee football who have that same behavior, and it's kind of
right,
sad.
Because they look up to these guys, and if they act like that, then they think they can get away with it too.
Yeah. But on a more positive note, Cleveland's with their first win since 2016. Baker Mayfield, he showed up. I don't know if you watched that game or not. Exactly. I'll throw one in there as well. He was a stud, dude. For how small he is or how small he looks. I don't know if you saw that when he came in. He has a cannon.
He does, yeah.
And did you see that juke move he put on in the pocket? He had what? It was funny because the commentators were talking about Tyrod Taylor, and right as they were talking about Taylor, they were saying how like agile he was, you know, to make plays, like move with his feet. And right after they said that, Mayfield just put on this insane move on one of the defensive ends, and then ended up doing, you know, making a 6 to 8 yard pass to the outside. So he looks good, and I know you texted me earlier that, you know, you saw Jarvis Landry make some great plays, and he did. He's looking solid for them. So congratulations for the for Cleveland Browns, and hopefully Baker Mayfield can actually be your future. I guess just wrapping up here, Buffalo beating Minnesota, one of the biggest upsets.
Huge upset.
Vegas. like in the last 20, 30 years in terms of Vegas odds.
Since I heard since 1995.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. Tennessee winning on the road in Jacksonville 9-6. What the heck?
Yeah, that was kind
there?
of a shocker.
Giants beating Houston, kind of a shocker. Chicago coming back, fourth quarter fashion to beat Arizona, and then
let's say Arizona's putrid. Arizona's going to be
that's
hot
true.
garbage.
That is true. But it was still impressive that Chicago did that because Mitch Trubisky was not. Oh, is that the train going by?
Yeah, it was actually.
Yeah.
Let me go ahead and mute that. Keep talking.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was still impressive though that Chicago did that because Mitch Trubisky he's been all right, but their defense has carried them. Khalil Mack is looking like an early Defensive Player of the Year candidate, along with Von Miller, both of whom I had in my top 10 Players of the Year this year. Seattle beats Dallas, no surprise, but Patriots get blown out in Detroit, and Brady had like 130 passing yards. So,
is he getting old?
I don't know. So we'll have to see if this is like a couple years ago, because the same thing happened a couple years ago. He started off slow, and Brady's got to retire. They'll never win another playoff game or Super Bowl again. Yada yada yada. And then he ended the last like 10, 12 games really well, and that's either when they beat. I'm pretty sure that's when they beat the Seahawks is when that happened, or maybe that was the Falcons, but. One of the recent years they won. There was all that chatter about him. So I'll end there. We can go to the next segment.
All right, so we're going to do our check-in this week for 49ers and Dolphins. So let's go ahead and start with Dolphins this week. Tell me about that game.
So I'm just going to wrap it all up with one stat. I mean, I got a bunch to say, but I'll say this first. This is the first time that Miami is alone in first place in the AFC East after week 3 since 1998. So hopefully that's a good sign moving forward, because that is sad. I was 9 years old.
2 games up on the Patriots now.
Yeah. So overall, and then I'll get into some specifics. Overall, front seven's looking good. Our linebackers are flying around yesterday. Robert Quinn still looking good. Cameron Wake as well. Our corners secondary was
really
not the
inconsistent
best
yesterday.
Yeah, inconsistent. Yeah, that's a good word. Tannehill looked good. His mechanics like fundamentally looked different. He was faster, right? He got rid of the ball better. His release was quicker. He was throwing stronger. He was accurate. Like he just looked so much better than last week and 2 weeks ago. So that was really encouraging to see. Our run game was awful. We couldn't do anything on the run game. It was funny hearing the announcers constantly drum up, and there goes Miami again, not able to run the ball. So we were I think actually Ryan Tannehill was the most consistent rusher on our team yesterday. So that needs to change, but I was excited to see the pocket protection was much better, giving Tannehill more time. And I'm becoming real big fans of Albert Wilson and Jakeem Grant. So they're starting to be some of my favorite players on that team. So then some more specifics. So did you know Ed Hockley had a son?
No.
So Sean Hockley, and he was the ref at the Miami game yesterday.
Wow. So you got a whole generation now. Interesting.
Yeah. So he's nowhere near as buff as his dad. But when the second I saw him, I was like, wait a second, who is that? It looks like Ed Hockley. So
Ed Hockley, buff and fair. Should make a T-shirt.
Yeah. Now Sean is probably going to be one of his arms is going to be as buff as his dad.
Just one
after yesterday's game.
Just one of his arms.
For all of the flags he threw. I'm assuming they only throw flags with one arm, but who knows?
Oh yeah, I got some good shoulder workout in there.
Yeah, so with all of the penalty flags that he had to throw, and he probably needed a few cough drops for how many times he had to say pass interference, personal foul, unsportsmanlike conduct. It was ridiculous. Yeah, I think there were more personal fouls than there were false starts. And yeah, so that needs to get in control. But it wasn't one sided. I don't think it looked like Miami and the Raiders were both just going at it. Let's see here. There's a lot of other specific things. We need to use our tight end more. The rookie Jasecki. For the few catches he had, he looked solid. So we need to use him more. Dude, Marshawn Lynch is still a beast. He may not be beast mode.
Did you see him? Did you see him get inside of a cannon and launch himself into the end zone in the third quarter?
Yeah, that was great. But But the best play. So I'll get to that in a minute. So he looked good, and I feel bad, a little bad for him, just a little bit that the rest of their offense is not clicking and not looking so good because he's out there with. Dude, if the wide receivers and defensive ends were just clones of Marshawn Lynch, the Raiders would be undefeated.
With a little more speed.
Well, just I guess a clone with respect to that position. So a Marshawn Lynch clone that's 6'4" for defensive ends. So, but his heart is crazy. So there was one play. It looked like here it was. Dude, so in the fourth quarter, there was a play where Marshawn rushes the ball, and he got -1 yards, but he was still moving and like bouncing off guys. He wasn't like really still, and they called it dead. But he was able to actually gain like a yard from the play, and he was still moving. And so he was probably really unhappy that they called it dead. but Robert Quinn comes up from behind him and just picks him up. And he's like flailing his arm and like somewhat stiff arming a guy, like getting his arm out of the way. And he's like, Marshawn's like still moving, and they call the play dead, and Robert Quinn just picks him up.
You got to do what you got to do, man, to stop the bulldozer.
It was hilarious. I mean, it was clearly there was no negativity between them, but that was really fun to watch. Xavier Howard had 2 interceptions, and that one in the end zone, definitely was almost sealed the deal before that great Jakeem Grant play. But that was an epic pick. And then lastly, I'll just say that last touchdown, that shovel pass to Wilson was well. First, Frank Gore had a great block. Frank Gore had a great block to even allow it to happen. I guess the only real thing Frank Gore did yesterday. And then they take off, and then Grant and Wilson meet up. They're running together because everyone's behind them, and they meet up at like the 20-ish yard line. And I've never seen this before. They high five each other. I've never seen that. They just blow past everyone, and before they even get to the end zone, they look at each other, they get closer, and they high five, and they score a touchdown. So really fun to watch. I have hope for Miami. So hopefully they can carry that.
My only other comments on that game were that Miami just had no run game yesterday. 14 carries for 41 yards. That has to change if you guys want to stay on top of the division. So one of your D linemen got ejected yesterday. I didn't even really see what he did. The camera angle wasn't very. Did he punch the guy?
So they started. So I watched the condensed version, so I didn't get to see the full replay of that. But even in the condensed, like they started messing around with one of the offensive line, and then he pushed the guy, and I think another guy came over, and then he ended up landing on a guy and still.
But that looked inadvertent, though. I mean, it just kind of looked like a couple guys were hassling each other, and then the guy that got ejected fell over, and then he got ejected. It was like I didn't really understand it. I don't. It seemed like maybe a little bit too much.
It was.
Like he should have gotten a warning, maybe.
Too much. Yeah, he should have got the unsportsmanlike conduct.
They get the 2 fouls, right? They get the first one, and then if they get a second one, then they get ejected. But some penalties are automatic ejections, and apparently that was one of them. It just didn't seem like it should have been to me.
I don't think it was either.
Okay, so let's go ahead and move into the 49er game. 49ers at Chiefs this week. So let's start with the good. And this will be quick because the good list is short. So the first half was one of the worst defensive performances I've seen by the Niners in a long time. And that's saying a lot because they've had some atrocious teams the last few years. But in the second half, when they were down, so at halftime they were down 35-10. They came out and they scored 17 unanswered points. They got 2 3-and-outs to start the half. They were playing pretty well. The defense held Kansas City to 3 points for the entire half. They came out with some spirit. So what that tells me is they came out flat-footed. They were playing at the loudest stadium in the league. They didn't know how to handle the explosive Kansas City offense. And they didn't have a game plan for Mahomes. Or if they did, it didn't work. They always have a game plan, but it obviously didn't work. So that second half spirited surge that they had was actually it rose to the level of, hey, they could actually tie this game. And then Jimmy went down and it all kind of blew apart from there. But I liked to see that they were able to come out of the locker room and make something happen, that they didn't just, that they didn't end the game 50-13. So the second good thing was that Matt Breida continues to look really good in the run game. He cuts for big plays. He's tied for the league lead in rushing. So I hope that keeps up. Alfred Morris also looked really great. He's their great hard runner. I made the comment last week that with Matt Breida's speed, his acceleration, his ability to change directions, and Alfred Morris's just hard running, their run game is really good right now. They're second in the league in rushing. So I hope that they can continue doing that they don't get injured, that we can at least, with a backup quarterback up there, that we can have the run game stay solid like it is. All right, so let's get on to the bad. So obviously the big piece of bad news from this week was that Jimmy Garoppolo tore his ACL. He's out for the season. So now the quarterback reins fall to CJ Beathard, who was drafted in the third round in 2017. Last year, he had 7 starts, which he got 1,430 yards, a 55% completion, 4 touchdowns, 6 picks, and he had a 69.2 passer rating. But here's the big one. He was in 7 games, he was sacked 19 times. When you have a quarterback go out from an ACL injury, which arguably was kind of his fault. I mean, I don't ever want to blame an ACL on somebody, but he kind of cut back in to try to get more yardage, 1 or 2 more yards, and he ended up not just running out of bounds like he should have. And I think that was the main cause for it. But neither here nor there. When your star quarterback goes out, and you got a guy coming in who was sacked 19 times in 7 games, so that averages almost 3 sacks a game. The O-line has got to step it up. They've got to give protection to this guy, or we're going to be looking at the 3rd string in 2 weeks. Tomorrow, the Niners are working out a bunch of guys. TJ Yates, Kellen Clemens, Tom Savage were amongst the names. I don't think these guys are going to be hired to actually play. These guys are going to be hired to be a veteran presence for the 2 young backups to play. The guys that can sit and watch the footage, watch the tape, the guys that can give tips, and the guys that can be sort of that rock-solid veteran presence. That's what they're there for. They're not there to go out and play. That's CJ Beathard's job. So all of this falls on his shoulders. The second bad was the defense. Just the whole defense. There was busted coverages all day. No pressure on the quarterback. They got 2 sacks. One of them was from a blitz where just sort of a breakdown, I guess, on the line. But there was no pressure on Mahomes at all, who's, as it is, already was showing like Russell Wilson type ability to move around and make plays. That laser touchdown he threw after keeping the ball, I think it was for 8 seconds running around in the first half. I mean, my goodness, he looked really good, but they got no pressure on him yesterday. The third thing was penalties. So they had 14 penalties for 147 yards. 3 or 4 of those were just atrocious calls, but nonetheless, they had some really stupid calls. I mean, they were getting calls like chop blocks and offensive PI and stuff that just makes them look like they're playing high school ball. So that's something that absolutely needs to get cleaned up. I thought it would have been cleaned up by this point, but because that was an issue 2 weeks ago and last week, but it continues to be a problem. The fourth thing is dropped balls. I mean, my goodness, you gotta catch the ball. There were so many great throws that Jimmy had yesterday and some critical drops that really killed drives. Fifth, another week of high school football bad tackling. I don't understand how guys can be at this point where they are in the league and be this bad at tackling. The coach, there's something wrong with the coaching, because guys like Reuben Foster had more missed tackles than tackles yesterday. Reuben Foster is a tackle machine. He's going to be a great player that's going to wrap guys up nonstop. But yesterday, he had more missed tackles than tackles. To me, that has to be a coaching thing. It was just so systematic across the board that these guys were not tackling correctly. We can get into it in a second, but I think there's a coaching issue with that. And then the sixth point is receivers not getting open versus man coverage. I mean, there was a lot of issues with that in the first half, just offensive disconnections. Guys don't have the speed to get separation. Marquise Goodwin's still not 100%, so he didn't have the speed. And then the seventh thing is just the number of first-round draft picks that we've had in the last few years that have just been kind of meh. Just meh. They're not playing at the level that they need to play for a first-round pick. Solomon Thomas, 3rd overall, no pressure on the quarterback whatsoever. 3rd overall defensive end, no pressure. Jimmy Ward, 1st round, I think he was late in the 1st round, but still, cornerback / safety, nothing. He didn't do anything yesterday worth speaking about. Eric Armstead, drafted high in the 1st round a few years ago. He had a sack yesterday. Outside of that, I think he had an offsides call. Very little pressure. He showed there were some lazy attempts to try to get at the quarterback. I hate that when I see defensive linemen not just going whole hog to the quarterback when the pocket breaks down. I know they were gassed in the first half, but man, I need to start seeing more from these guys. If the rest of the season goes by and I don't see more from Thomas, he's officially a flop in my mind. A 3rd overall wasted pick. So Joseph, do you think that when there's systematic bad tackling, that's a coaching issue? Or do you think it's a personnel issue?
The weird thing is how Reuben Foster got mixed up in that, because I mean, that was one thing he got praised for when he played for Alabama and why he was drafted so high was that he was such a good linebacker. I mean, and Alabama has always produced, 2 things, running backs and linebackers. So to see, and obviously he had a good year last year outside of the injury. So the fact that he got involved in this along with many other players to show a pattern, it would have to be either a weird anomaly / coincidence or coaching. So if it's not an anomaly, then yeah, I don't know what they've been telling him, how it changes, but the fact that Foster's involved in those mishaps is surprising.
So what do you put that on the position coaches? Is it on the defensive coordinator? I mean, where does the blame fall? And as a organization, how long do you let this go before you start firing people?
So I think it has to be on the position coaches. I don't think you put that on a defensive coordinator. His job is to more scheme up the plays rather than, I think, the execution of the fundamentals. if your offense is having issues, the coordinator might be the first one to go to. But if it's solely contingent on bad fundamentals of the quarterback, then you go to your quarterback coach and yell at him. So, how long you put up with it? Well, that's going to be dependent on what the expectations are for the team, obviously. But for you guys, 3 weeks.
3 more weeks.
No, including this week. So 3 weeks total of a pattern.
Well, this has been a pattern now for all of this, the whole season. This last week was a lot worse than it's been, but it's been an issue all 3 weeks.
Then probably one more week, or you're saying this is a pattern that we're seeing, and it's affecting even our top players or top drafted players. Why? And let's start at the top with coaches and assistants and work our way down as to why our players are doing this. So I say one more week. If they're having a bad, who do they play next week?
They're playing at Chargers next week.
Okay. And the Chargers are somewhere in the mediocre line. I mean, they have potential offensively, but they're more of a mediocre
and their stadium's
team.
also not incredibly loud. So I don't expect this. This is not. I mean, Arrowhead Stadium is fertile ground for defenses to fall over, but it's.
Yeah, so one more week like this than against the Chargers, and yeah.
Okay, I think I can agree. Yeah, one or 2 more weeks, and you got to start letting people go. All right, did you have anything else on the Niner game you wanted to say? All right,
nope.
So let's move into commentators say the darndest things. A little bit more cheerful of a segment, I'd say. After, I mean, I'm sorry, this week is just such a downer with the Niners. I mean, it's such a bad game. With you lose your quarterback to an ACL, there's really almost no good things to talk about. But we just gotta, embrace CJ Beathard, as hard as that is, and move on and hope for the best for the season. You can't 3 games in, you cannot give up on the season. There's still 13 more games to play. The guys cannot pack it in mentally. They have to get out there and give their best. And I sense that there are going to be 2 or 3 players that know that and are going to shine for the rest of the season. And I think that there are also going to be some players that are going to pack it in. And this is the time now where, because their season's over, they weren't going to go to the playoffs anyway, most likely, but now they're definitely not. Guys are being evaluated now, especially after yesterday's defensive performance. They're being evaluated to see if they're part of this team's long-term answer. And if they pack it in, those guys are going to be gone. So I'm excited to see the handful of guys that are going to step it up and play their heart out, and to stay with, not only stay with this team, but really make an impact in games and win games for this team. All right. So commentators say the darndest things. Do you want to go ahead and go with yours first, Joseph?
Yeah, so I had a few. There was some good ones. So there was one from last week that I didn't get to because I watched the game. It was the Browns at Saints. During the Saints had a fumble, and Sean Payton was obviously upset about it. And the commentator said, "No one prizes possessions more than Sean Payton." It's like, all right. No, okay. No one else. He's the all right.
Most coaches really hate possessing the ball when their offenses possess the ball. I mean, that's just the reality.
So yeah, that's a good one. And then there were 2 short but good ones in the Chargers Rams game. So there's some context for these. So the first one is Phillip Rivers threw an amazing touchdown pass, and Marcus Peters, the Rams picked him up recently this year. I mean, it was just an amazing pass and an amazing catch. Marcus Peters didn't defend it, and one of the guys said, he's like, speaking in lieu of Rivers, he's like, "Take that, Marcus Peters," because apparently Marcus Peters has intercepted Rivers 5 times in his career. So that was pretty funny. But the best one goes to. In the same game, but a different announcer, the Chargers run a reverse play, and Keenan Allen, the wide receiver, stops, and it's actually more of a play designed for him to throw the ball. And then he doesn't know what it looks like what he's doing. He holds the ball out weird and like tries to run and like slips and gets hit, whatever. So during that time, the announcer's like, "Oh, and it's a reverse. Allen's brother was a quarterback." And then it pauses and there's the stumble, and he says, "And he's not." And it was the perfect tone and timing the way the announcer said it. So I'm not giving it justice, but
that's awesome.
It was funny.
Great. So tonight, in the Monday Night Football game, so Steve Young was one of the announcers, not the announcers, but one of the halftime show guys. They had a panel of 3 people. There was a lady to his right. He had just finished talking about how explosive Pittsburgh's offense is, how established Ben Roethlisberger is, all these weapons that he has, and then the lady next to him says, Pittsburgh's offense is still trying to establish its identity.
Did Steve Young have a look?
No, I think he just kind of professionally let it pass. But he set up this thing, and then the lady just completely undercut it by saying that they have no identity. Which is, I mean, the irony of saying that when you have this total veteran quarterback with Antonio Brown and all these established players, and so that was awesome. I find that when you listen to, especially there's so much crap said in the halftime shows. I mean, almost all of that is garbage. Like when these guys talk about the game, unless they're explicitly reading a stat, they say so much fluff stuff. But then to undercut like that and to say something that is just the opposite of true is really funny to me, because she was obviously just trying to fill airtime with it. Okay, so next segment is a special discussion. This week we have a interesting article from 538.com, who's a website that leads in a lot of statistical analysis. They do politics, they do sports, they do just about everything. And Joseph's going to take us through this article that was written about the number of NFL players over and under the age of 30.
Yeah, so it is statistical analysis, and I'll give some of the key points, and then I have a lot of rants. This is more of a ranting session than it is a leading going through session, but I'll just, at a high level, I think it was incomplete, so I'll rant about that in a minute. Basically, they say here, in 2007, there were 201 players, not including kickers and punters. We'll get to that in a minute. Over 30 who started at least 8 games. This past year, that number was down to 133. So which equates to about 4 less players per team with that criteria. So that criteria was starting 8 games or more, not being a kicker or a punter, and being over 30 years old.
11 years later.
Yes. So that equates to a 33.8% drop. And then they go on to talk about what's the significance of this, why they're thinking it's about how players or how the teams construct their roster, which makes sense. And last year, the 8 division winners spent an average of 52% of their total salary on their top 10 players, which is no surprise, right? They probably have the running back and quarterback and top receiver alone are probably 25%. So then only half of the money is left for 80% of those rosters. So only the best players that are over 30 are even really going to get a chance. And actually, if you guys go to this article, they have embedded within here another really good article. This one's okay, but the one they reference is good, about performance declining by age 30. And they look at peak performance ranges for several different positions. So that was a good article. It's in there. And then the interesting point they end on is they show 7 teams for this year who have the most 30-year-olds that fit this criteria who are starting. And it's interesting because these are teams that, in the last 3 to 5 years have had some issues. And this year so far aren't really the best or expected to be very good. So Miami, Buffalo, and Carolina have 6. Um, right, Miami and Buffalo aren't expecting to be very good. Baltimore and Cincinnati have 7. Baltimore's been kind of average the last couple of years. Cincinnati's been very disappointing. And then Arizona and Oakland have 8. And Arizona hasn't done much in a while. And Oakland has, besides that one good year 2 years ago, hasn't done much in a while either. And John Gruden's coming back. What's interesting is that John Gruden, I wonder if he's keeping up on his similar style of play, of coaching, because the last time he left as a coach was 2008, which is a year after they started this data. So maybe it's intentional for why he's picking up on older guys, because you look at some of his comments here, and he basically speaking very positively of guys that are older on his team. And while that makes sense, it's obvious that guys who are in their early to mid 30s are not going to put up as much production as guys that are in their late 20s. That's kind of general information, and then I just have a bunch of rants here. So anytime I see a statistical analysis from people who do sports and there's incomplete data, I will admit I get pretty frustrated. I don't know about you, but just seeing the data, it's like, why even have an article if your analysis can be just completely undercut because it was incomplete. So
some guy had to write an article, man. It's his job. He had to write an article.
So the first thing, not including punters or kickers. Like, oh, hey, punters and kickers can last longer, but they're still a part of the data, and they're still very important. I mean, we've seen when teams have good kickers, they release them, and a good kicker can carry you a long ways. So that's already kind of all right, you guys are massaging the a little bit. This next one, arbitrary. I feel like 8 games started. Why did they cut it off there? Is it indicative of age? If they played or played well, or if they got hurt, do they consider those who turned 30 that season? I mean, who knows? I mean, how many guys who are 29 who turned 30? Like that wasn't even given or not, so we don't even know. It's all speculation. This next one, it's a 34% drop. That's over 10, 11 years. Has the structure of the NFL not changed over the last 11 years? The obvious answer is yes. There's been many fundamental changes to the NFL in the last 11 years. So a 34% drop seems big, but here's the thing. What's the average age of the starters? How about the standard deviation? Just saying the drop in total players over 30 says nothing. What if the average age is roughly the same? Right? Having this discrete jump from 29 to 30 and 29 or 30 to 31 without giving an average or the range of age doesn't really say much about the age of players in the league. So it's kind of a useless stat because it's incomplete. We don't know. Well, is the average age and the range of age changing? Or have you just picked this number 30 and ran with it and think that you're actually giving relevant data? So I got a few other rants here, but I'll stop with that.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that there's been major changes to the NFL in the last 11 years, because the main point I was going to make about this article is sort of a theory for what one of those things is that has changed and why that is affecting the players over 30. And this is somewhat of a guess, a little bit of a shot in the dark, but I think it's at least a plausible explanation. And that is that cutting aging and expensive veterans helps save money, in therefore saving salary cap space for the increasing number of grossly expensive contracts. So we know that in the last 11 years, and even beyond that, right? But there's just been a general trend in recent years of contracts for superstar players getting larger and larger and larger. And we see this especially with quarterbacks that are taking up more and more cap space. And so at the end of the day, there's less cap room to spread across the roster. And in order to keep a roster that they can afford, but that's also talented, they tend to drive more towards, the younger draft picks, for their first handful of years, 3 or 4 year rookie contracts. And once guys get past their 6th, 7th, 8th year, they'll say, okay, we're going to cut this guy for either trade for somebody younger or draft somebody younger so that we can afford to pick up the guys that are going to be the difference makers on the team. And I think eventually, that I think this salary cap issue with how much they're paying quarterbacks and how much certain players are demanding, like we saw this year with Khalil Mack, like we're seeing with Le'Veon Bell, that is going to be a bubble. That's a bubble that I think is going to pop eventually. But for now, as long as this trend is going on, where there's an increase in fewer players having a larger percentage of the salary cap, or the salary, I shouldn't say the salary space, then I think there's going to continue to be more and more cutting of veteran players that have more expensive contracts.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that part. That is one of the fundamental issues that's been happening, and guys who we see this a lot in baseball too. Actually, we see this in basketball as well as. Even if you have a good rookie contract or not, once you've put in the kind of 5 to 7 years and you've proven yourself, then you go after that next big contract. And teams are probably becoming less willing to do that unless they're for star players. So the guys they're pretty much getting ousted in the middle, right? If they're good enough for veteran minimum or, for a backup or practice squad, whatever, sure, they'll take them. But if they're an average player who thinks they should get star money and they're 30 to 34 years old, they're not going to get it. And they're forced to either take less, be a backup, or probably retire. So that it's not that the data is wrong, it's just it's incomplete. It doesn't tell a full story. And there's some aspects that seem arbitrary. Another one is, why did they pick 2007? I'd be surprised if they didn't have the data that goes back further than this. Did the trend stop at 2007 to help them out in their hypothesis? But either way, it's speculative. So,
yeah, your guess is as good as mine. Why they started in 2007, and you're right to point out that there are several standard questions that one should ask about an analysis like that they don't answer in the article. So there is a lot that is suspect, but I think that there is, if you just take the data for what it is, I think there is a plausible explanation for it.
Yeah.
All right. So did you have anything more on that to cover? All right.
No.
So let's move into our segment 5 predictions for the upcoming week. So, as we have promised each week, we are keeping ourselves honest with our viewership by telling you where we're at with our current records, what we had for this week, and then listing our predictions for the upcoming week. So currently, Joseph and I are now tied this week. I was 1 game behind last week, but we're now tied at 26, 20, and 2. This week I was 8-8. Joseph was 7-9. He was banking on the Bucks to pull out a win tonight. They lost 30-27 to the Pittsburgh Steelers at home. Sorry, Joseph, not sorry. So we are now tied at 26, 20, and 2. Your Fitz magic didn't pull through. I'm sorry, man.
I know, yeah. But he did have another 400-yard game.
Did. But I think he also threw 3 picks.
Yeah, he only completed 60%.
Yeah, so Fitz garbage. All right, so our picks for the upcoming week. So let's go in order, starting with Vikings at Rams. What's your pick?
Rams.
Same here. Bengals at Falcons.
Oh, and then we're going to rotate right now. You give your pick first.
I pick Falcons for this one.
Yep. Same.
Bills at Packers.
Packers.
Same. Bucks at Bears. I picked Bears.
Bears.
Lions at Cowboys.
Cowboys, one of the most irrelevant games of the week, though, unfortunately.
Yeah, we didn't have enough time to talk about Dak Prescott's putrid performance in Seattle and how much he's regressed. They're kind of a sad, weird situation, but we'll talk about that another week. Eagles at Titans. I picked Eagles.
Same.
Texans at Colts.
Okay, definitely a relevant game of the week.
Yeah, true.
Same. Colts.
Only because that was a home game. I think I probably would have switched if Texans were at home.
Yeah, I would have done that too.
Dolphins at Patriots. I know we're gonna differ on this one. I'm picking Patriots.
Yeah,
You're going with Dolphins,
man.
Yeah, I know they've been playing better, but it is in Foxborough. We'll see. I think it'll be a good game. Jets at Jaguars.
Jags.
Same. Browns at Raiders. I'm picking Raiders. I think this is going to be their first win of the season at home.
I'm going to go Browns. I'm going to create the momentum, and I think Baker's going to come out firing and get a second win.
All right. Seahawks at Cardinals. Is this my turn?
Seahawks.
Okay. Okay.
That's my turn.
Seahawks. Same. Saints at Giants. I'm picking Saints.
Saints.
Niners at Chargers. Same.
Chargers.
Ravens at Steelers. I'm picking Steelers.
Steelers.
Chiefs at Broncos.
Sorry. Whoa. Chiefs.
Whoa there, pal. Nobody can stop.
Yeah.
Nobody can stop this Kansas City train.
Patrick Mahomes gonna throw 3-4 touchdowns.
I'm gonna have to hear that for the rest of the season. I hope they tank just so that I don't. So this week, the Carolina Panthers and
who'd you pick though? You didn't say who you
picked.
picked.
The Chiefs.
Okay.
So
okay.
The Carolina Panthers and the Washington Redskins are on byes this week. All right, so Joseph, what is your game to watch of this upcoming week?
So I'm gonna go a little off track here. I'm gonna ask you to guess what you think my game of the week is.
Vikings at Rams.
Yeah, see, that's a good one to go with, but
you know what? It's Dolphins at Patriots, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I'm going Dolphins at Patriots.
All right.
Dolphins are only one of two undefeated teams, along with the Chiefs. And even though the Patriots are 1-2, they're still the Patriots, still Tom Brady. They're in Foxborough. The Dolphins do not do well there. If the Dolphins take this game, dude, that may. I'm not gonna say it's gonna secure the division, but man, it really increases the odds. So,
are you sure you want them to win one more game so that they can let you down harder in the second half of the season? It's just gonna hurt more, man.
It will hurt more, but you know what? I still want to see the 4-0.
So I'll give you this. I probably will watch this game. I'll at least give you that. Okay. Right. So I think that's about a wrap for this week. So
what's your game of the week?
I said, Vikings at Rams. I mean, that was my pick. So that's what I guessed you would say as well. I think those are the two. This is very possibly a NFC Championship preview.
No, that is true. So that would have been my second pick. So
okay,
if the Dolphins were not playing as well, then that would be my pick.
All right. So that's a wrap for this week. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and follow us on Twitter at the Practice Squad and at Neuralizer_. Just as a reminder, if you've missed past episodes, you can watch or listen to them right here on my YouTube channel, Neuralizer. I typically upload on Tuesday evenings the day after we go live. Thanks for joining us so much, everybody, and we'll see you next week.